Campers, what is the scariest, creepiest, or most disturbing thing that has happened to you in the woods? I had moved to Southeast Washington for work after college. The Blue Mountains were very close by, and, being a hunter, I was very interested in learning the land for hunting season. I went on several solo scouting trips into various areas, always picking locations that would put me the farthest from any public road or access point. I find in hunting that most people are too lazy to get far off the roads, so there's less competition in the remote areas. Being outdoors has never been new to me. I grew up on a farm and ranch in Montana, and have spent most of my youth working outside and dealing with animals. Not only did I have to tend to the various livestock, but I was raised into hunting and, above all, enjoy calling animals. I was 10 when I fooled my first coyote into thinking I was a dying jackrabbit, and since then have mimicked everything from rodents to bull elk well enough to fool predators and big game routinely. I know that with the explosion in bow hunting popularity, animal calls have become more commonplace, but I don't think you can appreciate it to the same extent a country boy can who learned how to echo back the calls of cattle, horses, chickens, and so on before being old enough to attend school. I'm not bragging here. I'm just laying the groundwork that I have a very trained ear for animal calls. So I set out one afternoon to run up the blues to scout for game. I got a late start, but no real worries, as most of the spotting of animal activity occurs at first and last light. I was only able to hike a couple miles from the road before I needed to find a spot to camp and watch for game. I climbed up a ridge and found a small, somewhat level spot to set up camp. I had a pretty good view of the surrounding area, but ended up only seeing a couple whitetails before dark. I kept a dry camp, no fire, and just turned in early for the night to get a good start in the morning. I was awoken at about 1 a.m. to probably the worst headache I have ever had. It would be just a surge of pain, then taper off, then come back. I was very careful about my hydration on the pack-in, so I knew it wasn't dehydration, about my only real concern on the trip. So I'm lying in my bivvy with this on again, off again pulse of pain, trying my best to diagnose the cause when my ears finally tune to this strange sound coming from the mountainside above me. My thoughts move from the headache to this animal call. It's not matching any of the calls I know. It's not matching any of the general patterns I know. It's too loud and repetitive. It's unique. It's very, very strange. I know instantly that this is a large mammalian call. You can say, how do I know that? And all I can say is I have a lifetime of experience like I stated above. It's definitely a mammal. It's big, with a deep, hollow vocal chamber, and although this is evident, I tell myself it is likely some Washington bird to ease my mind. After all, Washington must have different birds than Montana. So now I'm stuck, because if I focus on the sound I can't believe my nonsense that it's a bird, and as soon as I try not to think about the sound, the surging pain of my headache is unbearable. Close to 2 a.m. I make a judgment call and pull camp and head back to the truck, with this call repeating the whole time before this decision. The way I hiked to my camp was pretty direct but rough. However, there was a gated road just above my camp that circled back to the main road where my truck was parked. The distance would be longer to follow the road, but easier to travel in the night. Also, it led me directly toward this call before it would start to circle back to the truck. So with my 1911 in hand, I walked that road out. The interesting part is the sound stayed above me as I walked out, always directly up the mountainside and, after climbing up to the road, only maybe 200 to 300 yards distant. The animal clearly shadowed my departure, following along up the mountain a ways. As soon as I dropped down out of the mountains, my headache completely cleared. I have since decided this was likely due to altitude sickness, since I was also having a hard time regulating my breathing. The real fun came when I got home and had to start searching for bird sounds for Washington, at this point about 3 to 4 a.m. My search was not producing anything close to what I had heard. That small, nagging voice finally had me Google Bigfoot call, and darn if I didn't find an audio file of what I had just heard almost instantly. That call was so unique that on my drive home I grabbed a mouth reed and was able to duplicate it quite quickly. There is no doubt in my mind about what I heard. Of course, I have doubt about any sound on the internet labeled Bigfoot whoops, because who can say what call a mythological creature really makes, and how could you ever be sure? I can say that I never heard it again, even on return trips to that area. I even walked through the area it originated from, and it was a thick, nasty north-facing slope full of trees and vegetation. My mother has a great camping story. In their late 20s, she and my father were teaching in Lesotho. During the holidays they would go on camping trips in the massive parks in Zimbabwe. They were young and didn't know the dangers of camping in Africa, and they had my sister with them, who would have been less than a year old at the time. One night, they were camping in a tent and had my sister between them when they heard sounds outside. They say it sort of sounded like someone coughing. My sister was making baby noises, and it seemed to attract more coughing animals outside. Soon it sounded like a whole pack of something was outside the tent. My parents had no firearms and no knife or axe close by. One of the animals then started sniffing the tent, and it seemed like it was trying to dig under it to get to my now crying sister. My panicked parents were trying to find a way to save themselves and my sister, and in a panic-induced rage, my mother, with all the might and glory that only a mother who is scared for her child's life can produce, punched the snout of the hyena sniffing the tent. To this day my parents swear that the animal screamed in terror, and the whole pack ran off. Growing up in the woods and going camping, my family and I have our fair share of bizarre and scary stories. This one I just can't seem to wrap my head around, even to this day. My parents own 35 acres of property in the deep Rockies, about 2 or 3 hours away from our home. We spent as much time as we could camping there, as we all loved it. It was secluded and beautiful, and we had a lot of freedom there as kids. My parents were both experienced campers and backpackers and had both grown up in the mountains. One day we headed up at night, arriving at the property around 9 or 10 p.m. We were all tired and started to unpack the tents and such from the car. The minute we got out, we all got a strange feeling. It didn't feel normal or good. We had encountered wild predators before and knew the feeling of being watched, but this was like being watched from all sides. We also all noticed that there were no sounds. It was dead silent. Normally we would hear all the insects and the occasional owl, night hawk, or bat, along with the general hum of the forest. Nothing. We all kind of laughed nervously and maybe mentioned a few things but got to work setting up our tents nearby. This is when the really strange stuff started to happen. We began to hear rustling in the branches around us, about 3 meters off the ground, it seemed. It almost sounded like large creatures, like monkeys or raccoons, jumping from tree to tree loudly. And many of them. I have never seen raccoons do something like that, and these sounds were clumsy, unlike birds. It got louder and louder and became extremely unnerving. At this point, the tent was set up and my parents put my brother and me inside, telling us to stay there. They went out with flashlights, trying to make sense of this bizarre activity. As they were outside, we started to hear these bizarre calls. I have never heard anything like this before or since. Honestly, it almost sounded like humans mimicking some kind of primate holler or screech. There was an odd human-like aspect to it. It was as if they were calling and responding to each other from every direction, along with the branches cracking and rustling. My parents came back to the tent and told us they couldn't see anything at all. I remember how shocked and frightened my mom looked, and it scared me because she was tough and would stalk bears just to get a good photo. Both my parents were not easily frightened in nature, or at all. We were all huddled together in the tent, confused, scared, and unsure of what to do. The sounds were so loud and everywhere that it almost sounded like some crazy storm outside. Our dogs were cowering between us all, totally freaked out. My dad decided to go out again, and I remember that as he finished unzipping the tent, the sound stopped. Just like that, in an instant. And the oppressive, weird feeling was gone. He and my mom went out again to investigate and again found nothing, except fallen branches and some strange marks high up on some trees. They came back, calmed us down, and somehow managed to get us to sleep. We still talk about this to this day. None of us know what happened and have no explanation. Like I said, we had some crazy and strange things happen to us, but never anything remotely similar to what happened that night. I wasn't camping, but I took a long walk through the woods near my house a few years ago. Thinking back, it was kind of stupid of me to walk alone through the woods with no cell phone or any type of gear. Anyway, at the time, I lived on an abandoned golf course. There were several sidewalk trails and even some dirt trails from all-terrain vehicles and whatnot. I used to explore the golf course when I had time. One day, while out, I went deep into the woods, past the sidewalk trails, and at times I followed barely visible tracks from dirt bikes and all-terrain vehicles. I came across a red dirt path and walked down it. The path was eerie, though. As soon as I entered this particular area, the bugs stopped making noise. The birds stopped chirping. Everything in that area stopped making a sound, and the only sound was my footsteps. I know there's a certain name for this phenomenon, but I can't remember what it's called. I was so glad to get out of that area. I camped at the bottom of a valley with steep, rocky walls on either side during a backpacking trip in the Sawtooths in Idaho. In the middle of the night, we were all woken up by the sound of a rockslide, something that probably happens often in a place like that. It wasn't like an entire mountainside giving way, but there were definitely a few large boulders tumbling down. We could hear them getting closer and closer, smashing through large trees and destroying everything in their path. I thought about running out of my tent, but it was pitch black outside, and even if I could see clearly, I wouldn't be able to tell where the rocks were coming from or where they were going. I decided there were no better options than just staying in my tent and hoping I'd picked a lucky spot. We couldn't find any signs in the morning, and for all I know, the rocks might not have gotten closer than a few hundred meters. But that feeling of helplessness was pretty disturbing. A few friends and I had a long weekend, 5 days, off from school, and we decided to go camping in the North Georgia mountains. We packed a big 10-person tent, there were 5 of us, 2 guys, 3 girls, and loaded up my buddy's truck. He and I had some experience being outdoors, camping, hiking, and hunting, and he's an army vet, so we packed really well and had all sorts of amenities like a propane stove/grill, fold-up cots, and a portable shower. We were in it for the whole weekend. We left Wednesday afternoon, parked the truck in a small town, and started hiking into the woods to find a spot. It was a fairly normal hike until we got about 4 to 5 miles in. The first time we noticed something strange was when we came into a little clearing in the woods with a big pond/tiny lake in it. We stepped into the open area and everything stopped. No birds chirping, no squirrels running around, even the clouds and wind seemed to stop moving. My buddy and I both thought, well, shoot, there's gotta be a predator nearby, and took out our handguns. It's the law in Kennesaw, just in case. I've never seen a bear in Georgia, so we figured it was a mountain lion or maybe some coyotes. My friend and I were looking around the edge of the clearing and he grabbed me. He nodded across the water, and when I looked I saw what seemed to be a woman standing just at the tree line. She was maybe 150 yards away. We assumed she must live somewhere nearby, so we continued walking past the water and clearing. As we headed back into the woods, I looked over my shoulder at where she had been standing, but she was gone. The sounds of the forest returned once we got into the trees. We made a campsite about 2 miles past that, as it was getting late and we didn't want to be stuck building camp in the dark. We got everything unpacked and set up and built a fire, popped a couple of beers and sat down to hang out. There was a girl I was interested in on the trip, and we had been flirting, so after a few beers and once the sun was down, we snuck away from the fire under the pretense that she wanted help setting up part of the tent. We started fooling around, and after a few minutes she stopped and looked at me funny. I asked what was wrong and she said, nothing, it just got really quiet. We both pulled ourselves together and headed back outside to the fire. The others hadn't noticed anything strange and didn't mention anything wrong, except joking that it took us a long time to fix the tent. On the first morning we found that the propane stove had been turned on but not ignited and had gone empty overnight. None of us had used it. The second morning we noticed some things had gone missing. A lantern we left outside by the fire was gone, as was my crush's sweatshirt that she had left on a little folding chair/stool. We figured we just misplaced things or someone had used them and put them somewhere else. During the second full day, Friday, we were looking for a waterfall we read online was in the area. We were following the river upstream when everything went silent again. My buddy nudged me while we were walking and indicated up to the top of a hill next to the river. I looked up through the trees and was just able to make out the figure of the same woman. Same clothes and all, just standing. I couldn't tell if she was looking at us or not, but she was just standing there. My buddy told the girls he thought he saw a mountain lion following us and was gonna go scare it off. He hustled up the hill making a lot of noise and came back about 10 minutes later. He told the girls he'd scared it off, but told me quietly that the woman wasn't there when he got up there. We found the waterfall and put it out of our minds as we relaxed by the river. We hiked back to camp and found it a mess. It wasn't totally trashed, but it was clear something had gotten into our stuff. We told the girls it was probably raccoons. We both took our guns to bed with us. That night things went sideways. I remember waking up because my crush was squeezing my arm. I opened my eyes and she hushed me before I could ask what was wrong. There was complete silence all around the tent. I looked across the tent and my buddy was sitting halfway up, looking around. We both stayed awake for the next 2 hours or so until the sun started coming up, and then we packed our stuff and we all headed out. The entire hike back into town was eerily silent. There were a couple of points where I thought I saw the woman through the trees but never got a clear sight of her. We avoided the lake completely and got back to the truck in what seemed like half the time it took to get out to the camp. After we were safely on the road back home, the girls and my buddy all started to tell everyone about moments they thought they heard or saw the woman all weekend but were too freaked out to mention out loud, like she would go away if we ignored her. The wild part was none of us could describe her face. It's almost like it was blurry. No idea who she was, but I've never been camping or hiking at night since. I went on a group camping trip in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, only to wake up and hear something sniffing the outside of our tent. My immediate reaction was that it was likely a bear or some animal that came across our site, and maybe my not-so-bright friends hadn't tied up the garbage. Seconds later, I could hear the sniffing move to the tent next to ours, and everyone in mine grabbed one another quietly to acknowledge we were all awake and aware of what was happening outside. Moments later, a friend in another tent popped out and started to scream and make noise. He had a gun too, hoping it would scare off whatever animal was at our site. It turned out it wasn't an animal. It was some guy who had gone through our coolers and food and also decided it'd be okay to sniff our tents. Our friend chased him off, and we immediately packed our stuff and left. A year after the above incident, my not-so-bright friends and I went back to the nearby area, thinking what we encountered was a one-time incident. This time, we thought we'd outsmart any possible creepers, and instead of camping in our tents, we all slept in the beds of our trucks and sport utility vehicles. Because, you know, they can't possibly sniff a Toyota Tacoma. Anyway, it was the middle of the night. I was passed out in the back of my sport utility vehicle when I suddenly felt a bright light on my face. Naturally, I would have woken up, cursed, and asked who was doing that. However, I instantly knew to pretend to be asleep and not let the individual know I was awake. I lay there next to my girlfriend, hoping she would do the same as I did, and I kept an ear out for any unusual sounds, like sniffing. All I could hear was a friend snoring by the campfire. After the light left my car, I heard the person walk to the next truck and shine his light on my friends in there. I slowly looked up, and it turned out to be an older guy, just standing there staring at everyone while they slept. I waited until he left the campsite, then I jumped out of that truck and woke up my friends, most of whom had also been pretending to sleep and realized what was going on. I live in a rural town surrounded by mountains and forests, so camping is almost a weekly event, even in winter. The one I can't shake is when a friend and I broke off from our group of other 16 to 19-year-olds to camp by a better fishing spot about a mile away. We only brought one tent for the group, so we built a lean-to against a large boulder in a clearing. I couldn't sleep because I had the feeling something was watching us. I assumed it was a mountain lion, which isn't that big of a deal considering their behavior, so I threw some more logs on the fire. I looked up from the fire, and under the light of a full moon, there was a man standing at the edge of the clearing about 70 meters away. I was frozen and couldn't take my eyes off him while he presumably stared back. He walked off in the opposite direction after about a minute or two. I doubt he had any bad intentions, but I sat there holding my friends 357 the whole night. Before I tell my story, I'd like to re-emphasize what many here have already brought up, which is that humans are the most dangerous animal to encounter in the woods. I began training to ride the entire Colorado Trail in March 2008. I was new to bike packing, eager to try out all my new ultralight backpacking and bike packing gear. I attended half a dozen free advanced mountain bike maintenance classes at Bicycle Village. I initially started out going up for one night at a time, strictly on segment 1 of the Colorado Trail, as that was the only segment not completely blanketed in snow in mid-March and the trailhead is right by my house. As someone who has camped in Colorado for my entire life, solo camping on the Colorado Trail in March can be risky business if you don't spend much time in the backcountry. I try to play it safe. I hang my food and waste, I maintain a small fire and cook at least 20 feet from where I pitch my tent, and I wash with soap and water before I ever get near where I sleep. I even keep an air horn, bear mace, and a tactical fixed-blade knife. I have a bell on my frame bag and so on. It was like the 5th or 6th time I went up. I can't remember, but I was definitely excited because we had an irregularly hot St. Patrick's Day week and a whole new section of the trail was accessible that had been covered in snow and mud the previous weeks. So I checked and rechecked all my gear, made sure I had enough layers in case it dipped down into the teens, and headed out from my apartment in Littleton. It's pretty awesome being able to ride from your front door and, 45 minutes later, be deep in the forest, even though I live in a pretty populated city. At any rate, I was new to the Colorado Trail, and once I got past Bear Creek everything was brand new to me. It was perfect. The single track wasn't muddy, the birds were chirping. I came around one particular corner just past Bear Creek and I saw a full suspension trek leaning up against a tree. That's curious. I kept on, and about 100 yards from the bike I started to hear some sawing with a handsaw. Finally, I got to a clear section where I could see up ahead a ways, and there was a downed tree blocking the trail, with a guy in his mid-50s with long brown hair, a flannel shirt, and jeans sawing the tree to clear the trail. He was a nice guy, said he'd been riding the trail for decades, and comes up every spring to clear the downed trees. I helped him clear the huge tree out. He had already done all the cutting, and I helped him pull all the sections off the trail. He was very interested in my journey, my gear, and where I was heading. Not too interested, but as a mountain biker he seemed excited for me. I feel like now, in retrospect, I definitely told him too much information. Somehow while talking I told him I wasn't armed, where I was heading, that I was new to the Colorado Trail, and so on. He seemed like a genuinely good guy, and when a couple of dudes are hauling logs together it's easy to let your guard down while chatting. As we were parting ways he told me that there was a beautiful spot about half a mile up the trail on the right. He said there was a campfire pit and it was sheltered from the wind by these cliffs, and it had an amazing view of Waterton Canyon. I was tired after riding all the way from my apartment, hauling logs, and it was getting later in the afternoon, so it sounded great. I followed his directions and found the site. He had even told me about some tools he leaves wrapped in a waxed canvas bag under this cliff ledge. Surprisingly, I found it right after I set up my tent. It had a hand saw, a hatchet, a hammer, and a few other hand tools. I used it to cut a bunch of wood to get me through the night and put it back under the ledge where I found it. I ate a good dehydrated meal, followed up with some cherry cobbler, chilled by the fire, smoked a bowl, cleaned up, and went to bed. The first few times sleeping alone in the forest were definitely scary, and I lay awake jumping at every sound the first night, but by the fifth or sixth time, I had started bringing earplugs so I could finally get some real sleep. I was sleeping and something woke me right up. I don't know what it was, but it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I found my headlamp, popped my head out of my REI quarter dome but saw nothing. I put my clothes back on and got out of the tent with my bare mace and my fixed blade at the ready. I remember it was irregularly warm for mid to late March, but after something woke me up there was no wind, no sound, nothing, just still and silent. I looked around with 2 flashlights and didn't see anything, no eyes, nothing. I forgot to mention I also keep a personal jogging alarm that screams at 130 decibels when you pull the pin. I pulled the pin to scare away anything that was near. I might not have heard it, but something definitely woke me up out of a dead sleep while I was wearing earplugs. I can't really explain it. It is not logical, but right at that moment, after firing off the jogging alarm, something sent a wave of fear through my entire body. It was as if I was paralyzed for a minute or so. This was not my first time camping solo by any means, and it wasn't just in my head. Something really freaked me out. If I was car camping I would have thrown the entire tent and all my stuff in without breaking anything down and sped right out of there. It's not that easy bike packing. I had to sit there and properly pack all of my gear and make sure everything was balanced properly. It took me close to 15 minutes to get packed, and I was literally terrified the entire time, as if something or someone was watching me from close by. I finally got everything packed and started biking out of there. It was a little bit of downhill and then about 1.5 miles of harsh uphill single-track riding, even harder with 23 pounds of extra gear, in the middle of the night, and terrified. So I'm chugging up the single track at like 2 in the morning in my easiest gear, going really slow. I could actually see pretty well, though. The moon wasn't full but almost. I was about halfway up the last really harsh incline before I got to the intersection at Lenny's Rest, after which it was all downhill all the way home, so I was really pushing harder than normal to get there. I was still scared, but it seemed to have subsided a bit due to the adrenaline from the cardio when all of a sudden I hear something walking like 4 feet to my right off the trail. I literally froze. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my entire life. It was steep there, so I had no choice but to jump off my bike. I yelled as loud as I could, "Get the heck out of here, you jerk." That didn't do anything, and I heard whatever large animal this was shift its stance or something and some twigs cracked. The forest was really thick off to my right and I couldn't see 5 feet. Whatever this thing was, it was like 4 feet away. I finally got enough momentum to get back on the bike and continued up the trail. I had to get off and hike a few more times, and at this point I am screaming at the top of my lungs because I keep hearing something walking really close to me. It almost sounded human. I finally got to Lenny's Rest at the very tippy top of the hill, and I was exhausted from pushing myself so hard. I stopped to catch my breath at Lenny's Rest. I didn't get off my bike, but just stopped and was holding myself up on Lenny's bench, and if I didn't hear something running uphill toward me from like 25 feet down the hill to my right that I had just ascended. If anyone's ever been on segment 1 of the Colorado Trail, you know that when you're heading back to Denver from Lenny's Rest it's like a launch pad with nothing but 7.4 miles of downhill, starting out steep with winding single track and switchbacks, and leveling out once you get off the single track and onto the water road. Something was running at me fast, uphill. I do not know what it was, whether it was human, cougar, or black bear, but I knew something was stalking me for the last hour, and I thought I was home free once I got to Lenny's Rest, so you can imagine how terrifying it was when I heard branches crunching loudly and something was literally running right at me. I took off down the single track faster than I have ever done in the daylight. In retrospect, this was so stupid because there are cliffs on each corner of the switchbacks, and if I messed up even a little I would have flown off a cliff. I didn't care and I was carving around the switches like a professional mountain bike racer. I was flying, but at one point about halfway down I always have to get off the bike at this one really rocky spot with a boulder. I slowed down and got off, walked the bike around the corner, got back on, and before I took off I got real quiet and listened, and no kidding I could hear something up above me crashing down through the trees. It was bypassing the normal trail and switchbacks and just crashing straight down the mountain toward me. I'd say whatever this thing was, it was around 100 yards up the mountain from where I was. I hit it in high gear again, full throttle, didn't stop again, didn't look back, breaking land speed records from that point all the way down until I was on Wadsworth Boulevard.